Donald Trump takes office as the new U.S. president. What does the Trump administration have in store for America's future? With his unfiltered comments and unconventional moves, Trump is also expected to bring about change in Korea and the rest of the world. All this right ahead.
America great again.
Hello and welcome to News Inside. I'm An Jang-hyun. Let's welcome back our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-hyuk from Kyung University Graduate School of International Studies is back with us, as is Dr. Bong Young-sik from Yonsei University Institute for North Korean Studies. Welcome back. Donald Trump will soon be sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. The real estate mogul is a political outsider who stunned the world with his election victory last year. What changes can we expect under the Trump administration? Take a look.
Because we will fix.
After fierce campaigning to make America great again, Donald Trump takes office as the next president of the United States and is expected to break conventions in leading the country. Trump was a political outsider, having long been a business mogul who won global recognition from hosting a popular reality show. After changing political affiliations a number of times, Trump settled in the Republican Party and was elected the 45th president. Back in November, he announced a list of executive actions he would take on the first day in office. From trade to energy, regulations, and national security, his initiatives differed greatly from existing policies. Trump's cabinet has also mostly taken shape. Notably, a considerable number of members have high-profile business or military backgrounds and billions of dollars in assets. Most of Trump's supporters say they voted for him in hopes of seeing big change. Exactly what form that will take will now depend on how the new leader formulates policies and reshapes the existing order.
And we will make America great again. God bless you, everybody.
From his campaigning days leading right up to Inauguration Day, Trump has stirred up a lot of controversy. Should we expect more of the same from his new administration?
Basically, I think so. But as a candidate, he has introduced his policy platform for a while. But after he became a president, there must be some changes, but not very big changes. As the president, he wants to implement a policy or promises what he gave to the people as a presidential candidate with his full efforts.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Trump will be like in office?
I would agree on the same, more of the same. Trump will be Trump. Why will he abandon his style, which has been enormously successful during the campaign and eventually led to his victory in presidential election? There is no strong reason for him to deviate from the unfiltered comments and flamboyant and erratic behavior that have been working so well to his advantage.
Well, the problem is there's still a lot of anti-Trump sentiment and deep divisions in the U.S. How big of a challenge do you think this will be for the new president?
Well, I think the racial issues will be one of the big burdens on Mr. Trump. As you know very well, the African American society has been very hostile against Mr. Trump because when he was the presidential candidate, he touched a very sensitive issue, racial the issues. And without the settlement of this issue, he became the president of the United States. So definitely it will be one of the difficult challenges to him. I think, we can see such a kind of the divided society in the United States not very often, but I think certainly divided society can be one of the most difficult issues for Mr. Trump to settle down.
I'd like to play devil's advocate, saying that his low approval rating, currently hovering around the 44%, which is very low compared to President Obama's 83% on inauguration day and President Bush's rate 61%. But these very low expectations for President himself and his policies may be to his advantage, because what happened to his predecessor, George W. Bush, was that Bush was called as the master of lowering expectations. So no Americans would really expect him to be as wonderful speaker, orator like President Barack Obama. And whenever he made some small and big mistakes, people were not really disappointed, because people did not really expect a lot from President Bush in the first place. So by the same logic, since there's a very low expectation for Trump presidency, then whatever Trump as a president is going to do, people will just accept it as it is. High expectation would usually lead to deep disappointment, but in that regard, Trump is very advantageous.
We'll have to wait and see which direction the approval rating goes, so whether it goes up or it can still be lowered.
Even the fact that he has appointed 11 of the 13 department heads as Caucasian, that news does not really stir up public opinion, because people did not really expect him to be really big on promoting diversity or the perfect union, just like the Obama administration. Right. And he also appointed his family members in high posts, but people just accept it because they believe that it's just Trump being Trump.
Well, speaking of his picks for his cabinet and key officials, they were surprising and interesting, to say the least. What can we infer from the lineup?
We can infer from the lineup three things. One is that outsider politics. President-elect, now President Donald Trump himself was an outsider to Washington politics. So he is still riding on and counting on the people's support for this anti-establishment sentiment. Look at his lineup, like the new Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, is a longtime CEO of ExxonMobil energy company. So he's just an outsider. We have discussed the potential candidates for the next Secretary of State, including Governor Mitt Romney or the former New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. But Donald Trump chose Rex Tillerson, not just one of those familiar Washington usual politicians. And the second key word for Trump cabinet is the Wall Street. He incorporated and recruited a lot of the big names in the Wall Street, such as the new Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin of the Goldman Sachs, and the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who used to work in the Rothschild. And the third and last keyword was super rich.
Billionaires.
Billionaires. It is reported that the personal wealth, the average wealth of the newly appointed secretaries is almost $6 billion US. So
it's the wealthiest cabinet so far.
Wealthiest cabinet as well. So people like me who identify as an outsider to establishments cannot really relate myself to this cabinet.
Well, as for the media, though, Trump has had a very tumultuous relationship, which was also evident in the first news conference he gave last week. Now, there are reports that the administration may actually evict the press corps from the White House. What kind of impact do you think this kind of conflict with the media could have?
Well, the senior official in the incoming Trump's administration, they consider the possibility of moving the press room from White House to new building. Actually, after his announcement, someone just said that potential move is like the hostile strike against the very hostile press corps. Actually, in the wake of the New York's the news conference. But actually, since the time on, Mr. Trump, he criticized CNN and he called CNN as like the fake news, and then BuzzFeed as like the failing pile of the garbages for the reporting informations compiled by the former British information agent. Actually, this information included the Mr. Trump's activities in the Moscow and his relationship with the Kremlin. So because of that, actually, Mr. Trump was very upset about CNN and BuzzFeed. But definitely, it will be one of the, task. Very important things for Mr. Trump to deal with. Because without the good relationship with the mass media, definitely, it will be quite difficult for him to carry out his role as a president.
Yeah, he calls the media the opposition party.
Yes.
Well, Trump has used Twitter as his primary tool for communication, saying it's his direct channel to the public. But his unfiltered comments are also a source of concern and controversy.
Right. During the presidential campaign trail, this one time and the unilateral message via Twitter was very effective and safe for politicians. You just deliver the very succinct and pointed messages to the constituents without going through the media, filtering the message. But now your position has been changed from the political candidate to the president and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So whatever you say will trigger direct impact on politics and policy, and you will be solely responsible for the consequences of the remark. So no longer will this type of communication channel remain as effective as it used to. And as Professor Shin pointed out, that without forging a workable, not constructive, but at least workable partnership with the media, then the White House will not maintain the image that it is representing the hardworking, common U.S. citizens' interest, as opposed to the interest of big corporations or the powerful lobbyists. Remember that we just said that the average personal wealth of the cabinet members exceeds $6 billion US dollars. And Mr. Trump is supposed to represent the voice of poor, hardworking, blue-collar workers in the Rust Belt and the agricultural sector. So something will be off balance. And without having the support from the media, then Trump presidency will suffer from this discrepancy and the criticism from the disappointed public in the long run.
Well, in the meantime, Trump is out to erase Barack Obama's key legacies, such as Obamacare and the TPP. He even ordered all ambassadors appointed by Obama to be gone by Inauguration Day. Why do you think he's doing that?
Effacing the fingerprints of the predecessor is a very tempting proposition for any newly elected president. For instance, the George W. Bush administration defined its foreign policy as ABC, all but Clinton. Making distinction between predecessors' main policies and your own is something that any president would like to highlight and pursue. But to take this thing to the extreme, this is only for the Trump administration. And I'd like to see what kind of short-term and long-term consequences this kind of extreme action will actually result in. But we have to bear in mind that what is at stake is not the president's reputation or credibility, but your nation's credibility. South Korea is going through the same dilemma these days because of the 2015 joint declaration by foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan about the wartime sex slavery issue between Japan and South Korea. And some people argue that South Korean government, even the acting president, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won, would waste no time to just scrap the deal because it was a wrong deal made by Park Geun-hye administration. But what is at stake is not just the reputation and credibility of Park Geun-hye presidency, but the reputation and credibility of South Korea as a sovereign state in international relations. So applying this consideration to the case of Donald Trump presidency, then you may want to pursue some policies to start everything with a clean slate, but at the same time you have to also take into account protecting the credibility and trust of the United States as a leading figure in world politics.
Well, under the new Trump administration, the world is expected to see massive changes that will challenge the existing order. What does this mean for Korea and other countries? Here's a look at what to expect.
One of the words that has most commonly been associated with Trump's presidency is uncertainty.
My agenda will be based on a simple core principle: putting America first.
For 37 years, the U.S. has upheld the One China policy, but as president-elect, Trump challenged that foundation with Beijing by holding a telephone conversation with the Taiwanese president. Trump's Secretary of State nominee has also labeled China's island building in the South China Sea illegal.
We're going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building stops, and second, your access to those islands is also not going to be allowed.
The issue of North Korea has also become a tool of pressure against China. As president-elect, Trump has highlighted Beijing's role in influencing Pyongyang. Not only that, many expect the Trump administration will take a hardline stance on the North as well. Opening the new year, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un announced the country was nearing the final stage of testing an intercontinental ballistic missile. Trump responded by saying, "It won't happen." Unlike on China and North Korea, when it comes to Russia, a different tone appears to have been set.
As far as hacking, I think it was Russia, but I think we also get hacked by other countries and other people.
Trump has even mentioned the possibility of lifting sanctions against Moscow. With a Trump presidency increasingly looking likely to shake up the balance in the international community, many will be closely watching developments from Washington and how they impact Korea.
The centerpiece of Trump's policies has been putting America first, and in trade, that would take the form of stronger protectionism. In fact, over the past weeks, Trump has threatened a big border tax on companies that are producing goods for the U.S. market outside of the U.S. So what does this mean for Korean electronics manufacturers like Samsung and LG who have factories in Mexico?
Right. I think the Korean companies who are entered into Mexico, they could have huge impact from the decision made by the United States government. Well, first of all, the Samsung Electronics produce the TV sets and the TV monitors, and then the refrigerators and washing machines. Well, in fact, the total sales volume in the Northern European market was 42.5 trillion won, which was equivalent to 31% of total sales volume of Samsung Electronics. So this is a huge market. How about the LG? LG also had 16.4 trillion won sales volume in 2015, which was equivalent to 29% out of total sales volume of the LG. Second point, actually, as you know very well, as the presidential candidate, Mr. Trump, even after he was elected as a president, he emphasized that USA will not join to the TPP. And secondly, the USA should have renegotiation for NAFTA.
Right.
And in this context, he will impose, according to him, the United States government will impose 45% tariffs on Chinese-made products and 35% tariffs on Mexican products. So, well, particularly we have to pay attention to the 35% which the USA government is scheduled to impose on the Mexican products. Samsung and LG, when they produce these products, they should pay 35% tariffs to the United States. That means the prices of these products in the USA market will go up by 35%.
Right.
So definitely, because of the increased price, maybe certainly the Samsung Electronics and LG will lose the price competitiveness in the USA market. But one thing which is quite good, for the Samsung Electronics and LG, that is, when they impose, particularly when the USA government impose 35 tariffs on these products imported from Mexico, it means what? The prices in USA market will go up. Certainly people do not like it. So we have to wait and see for a while, but we can say there are more possibility that USA government will impose 35 the tariffs on the products imported from Mexico.
And there's also possibility that other countries will take this case to the WTO, World Trade Organization, for ruling if it is possibly in violation of free trade, because imposing the border tax is not really in the spirit and principle of free trade. So we have to wait and see. But the WTO ruling usually take enormous amount of time for final results. So in the meantime, each country, including South Korea, has to come up with their own measures to protect their business interest.
Yes, but considering the situation we have, which means that big economies such as USA, they did not respect the final rulings of WTO. Of course, they respect much more the rulings than before, but they do not always follow or respect the final rulings of the WTO. So certainly it is quite burdensome on the Samsung Electronics and the LG or other foreign companies.
And the Kia Motors too, right?
Right, doing business activities in Mexico.
Right.
We've already seen Japan's SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son and China's Alibaba chairman Jack Ma meet with Trump and promise massive job creation in the U.S. Have we seen any significant moves from the Korean private sector yet?
Well, as I said, that the Kia Motors may face a very tough decision about its factories built in Mexico, which it took almost $1 billion for the company last year. And 60% of the products from this factory in Mexico is supposed to be sold in the U.S. market. So the Trump administration's border tax decision will have a direct impact on the business profit of Kia Motors in Mexico. So NAFTA is gone if the Trump policy is going to be implemented, and there's no TPP. So in this new environment, the survival policy of main corporations of South Korea should be totally reconsidered.
Yeah.
And it is very interesting that in the Davos Forum, that not President of the United States, but President of China was strongly advocating free trade and globalization is good.
经济全球化确实带来了新问题，但我们不能就此把经济全球化一棍子打死。
This is supposed to be said by the U.S. president in Davos Forum, but now China is talking about, globalization and free trade. And when Donald Trump, as a U.S. president, is talking about border tax, so something is fundamentally changing in this world.
So what can Korea do to prepare for this potential shakeup in trade relations?
As you know very well, Korean economies heavily rely on external trade, and then the situations have been changed dramatically. So we have to find a way. But I think it's not very easy, though, for us to find the way we have to take. But one thing is clear, that is we should do what we can do. For example, right now we have to contact directly with the new USA government. We have to keep on explaining our situation with the USA government, because that considering the responses or statements from the incoming government, USA government, without whether they have enough information about Korean economy and Korean economic structure, something like that. So we have to keep on contacting them directly to explain our situation, and at the same time we have to, for example, make every effort to increase the value of the Korea-USA FTA.
Another solution, in addition to the external approach toward the United States, is expanding the domestic consumption. The South Korea is now a significant domestic market in terms of GDP per capita and living standards. But the downside of this approach, expanding domestic consumption, is that the circumstances compel Korean citizens to tighten their purses because of their investment in housing and their educational costs for their children. So unless South Korean government comes up with effective solutions to address these major concerns of the average households of South Korea, then South Korea's domestic market, despite its huge potential, with a population in excess of 50 million people, will remain limited.
Yeah, especially if the U.S. raises its key interest rates.
Right, definitely.
Well, Trump has also indicated that he'll be weighing America's interests with key allies, including Korea. I know we've talked about this before, but do you think we might see a withdrawal of U.S. troops from Korea?
If you're talking about a massive withdrawal of U.S. troops in the scale similar to what happened under the Nixon administration in early 1970s, the answer is no. But what the Trump administration is emphasizing to its Asian allies, including South Korea, is that we will not withdraw our troops because it is very important in protecting and serving U.S. own strategic interest in East Asia by keeping these important strategic outposts.
We must also embrace our international alliances and security partnerships. History is clear. Nations with strong allies thrive, and those without them wither.
But allies should also be responsible in terms of making fair contributions to common interest. So no withdrawal, but more demand for fair share for Asian allies.
So it is looking increasingly likely that Washington will at least demand that Seoul pay a larger share of the defense cost. What are Seoul's options?
In the year 2015, the national defense budget in Korea out of total GDP was 2.4%. And this is much higher than the others. In case of the Japan, the national defense budget just took 1% out of total their GDP. How about Germany? 1.09%. So considering these the national defense budget out of total GDP in many countries, Korean the ratio is the highest already. Second one, in fact, we have purchased the weaponries from 2006 to up to 2010. Weapons are worth 36 trillion won. And number one, the country, I mean, we purchased was United States. We purchased majority of the weapons from the United States. So huge amount of money went to the United States. And in the same context, the USA base is going to move from Yongsan to Pyeongtaek. Due to this one, they need about 17.1 trillion won. Out of this one, the Korea should have to take 42% of the costs, which is equivalent to 8.9 trillion won. So already we're
doing enough.
We're doing enough. So we have to persuade the USA government continuously, but we have to wait and see, because as we discussed before, what he said as a candidate could be quite different from
what he
as
does
a president.
as president,
Yes.
right?
And we have an agreement already signed by both governments about how to share defense spending to support the U.S. forces in South Korea until the end of 2018. So they could be cited as a big leverage for South Korean government.
As for North Korea, many expect the administration will maintain a hardline stance for now. What do you think the North Korea policy will be like, and would that include dialogue?
All possibilities are on the table for Trump administration because although the Trump administration identifies the North Korea's nuclear and missile programs as a grave threat to U.S. national security, but in terms of security priorities, North Korea is not one of the top priorities for U.S. government. They have Russia, China, and the Middle East, and the global terrorists. And the default strategy so far announced by the Trump administration is that China has to assume more responsibilities in terms of curbing North Korea from dangerous provocations. So outsourcing China for North Korean affairs will be the first cut of Trump administration North Korea policy. If it does not work really well in the eyes of Washington, then U.S. government will contemplate switching gears, probably from just being patient with China and North Korea toward more assertive, including more direct involvement in the Korean Peninsula affairs.
Well, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's not going to be too happy to hear that.
Not-
North Korea is
right.
not one of its top priorities.
But the problem with the North Korean regime is that for the first time since the outbreak of North Korean nuclear crisis in early 1990s, uncertainties and erratic behaviors are no longer the strategic asset for North Korea, but it works for Washington. So uncertainties favors Washington for the first time this time.
We'll see. Well, Trump has been vocal about improving ties with Russia. In fact, just this week, he offered to end sanctions on the country in return for a nuclear arms reduction. Why do you think he's focusing so much on Russia?
Well, in fact, there have been many reports that Mr. Trump has very close relationship with the Russian President Putin. And then on the part of Putin, why he wanted to maintain good relationship with the Mr. Trump? Because of the Obama administration has been very hostile against his government, even after the Ukraine situation, definitely. But even though the relationship between two countries have been worsened over the last several months, but the USA is very important for Russia, and Russia is very important for USA. So they have the needs to keep the relationship, close relationship each other. So in this context, Trump is the right person for the Russian government to improve the relationship between the two countries.
It could also be a way for Washington to keep China in check by becoming more friendly with Russia.
If you look back the entire history of U.S. Global strategy, then only in rare occasions has United States been confrontational to both Russia or former Soviet Union and China at the same time. It's always serving United States' global strategic interests better when there is a division between Russia and China, including the Cold War era. So Trump's policy toward Russia, in order to reset the bilateral relations between Moscow and Washington, is not really something totally surprise or deviant from the pattern of a strategic vision of the United States in history, but rather a repetition of it.
In the meantime, tensions with China have been on the rise. In Davos this week, we saw Chinese President Xi Jinping try to assert Beijing's position as the global power.
Well, Xi Jinping, as the president of China, why he insists such a kind of importance of the free trade? Actually, he wants to use this opportunity to strengthen, to build the image as one of the leading countries in the world. By supporting free trade, definitely he will build image of one of the leading countries. While the USA, the government, just returned to the protectionism, which means that they could not avoid the criticism from the global community, because that in the sluggish global economy, definitely free trade seems to be one of the very important things and one of the very few remaining ways to overcome the economic difficulties.
Now, these tensions have been sparked by Trump questioning the one China policy and threatening to label Beijing a currency manipulator, all of which could have major ramifications for Korea.
In many ways, that making one China policy something negotiable, not something sacrosanct between U.S. and China, is worrisome to South Korea, because it implies that Trump administration regards all important and sensitive security issues negotiable. Everything can be on the table for negotiation, which is very ominous and worrisome to South Korea as a security partner of the United States, because there is no possibility that Washington may involve in direct communication and negotiations with Pyongyang without due consultation with Seoul in the name of diffusing nuclear threat from North Korea. Then it will strain the security partnership with South Korea and the United States, because at the end of the day, without sufficient degree of mutual trust, no security partnership can be solid. and functioning.
As for currency manipulation, Korea is
Right.
under threat of this.
Under
as well.
threat too, because of the China bashing as a currency manipulation may also trigger unnecessary wave to include South Korea as another target of U.S. criticism
Indeed.
as a currency manipulator.
Definitely.
Basically, I think Trump wants to pressure China to review its currency and trade practices.
I think President Trump is ready to pressure everyone and every country and see what happens.
In fact, that the Chinese government want to make the Chinese yuan as one of the international key currencies. By making Chinese yuan as one of the international key currencies, they get the practical economic benefits as well as the symbolic benefits. By making the Chinese yuan as one of the international key currencies, maybe their status in the global financial market will be strengthened, and then they will gain more the practical economic benefits. So they will keep on making every effort to make the Chinese yuan as one of the international key currencies, but USA does not want to see it. So there must be some huge conflicts between two giants, I think.
But I think you raise a very important point. Although there is never intended outcomes by the United States, maybe the pressure diplomacy in the sector of international finance and trade may raise the international stature of China as a supporter of free trade and fair, economy and the financial system's transparency, as opposed to the United States, which has been the major champion of open system.
Yeah.
So if there's any virtue coming out of this very confrontational situation between Washington and Beijing, it depends on what kind of a time frame you would apply to decide who will be the winner or who will be the loser coming out of this confrontation. In the initial phase, the United States may be seen like a winner, but in the long run, that hardline policy of the United States may make China eventual winner.
Well, we are certainly facing the advent of an interesting era. Well, we have to wrap up. Any final words?
Well, I think the coming several months will be very important for the Korean economy. Game is on. in the United States, they got new president, they got new administration, while we don't have. We have leadership vacuum. So definitely, external situation is changing very rapidly, but we are behind the other countries in an effort to seek for our national interests. So we have to make every effort, to gain something, or not to, keep the current status at least in the relationship with the United States and other major economies in the world.
Dr. Bong?
I like to cite one of the leading figures in field of political economy, Professor Mo Jong-lin of Yonsei University. Professor Mo made a very interesting observation about Trump presidency, which demands South Korea to pay more contributions to be a fair security partner, and the Trump administration raising the wall of protectionism in international trade. Professor Mo's argument is that this is time for South Korea to try to become a normal country. South Korea's success in international trade and national security owe a lot to the international liberal order created by the United States after the end of the Second World War. Now those premiums are likely to be gone or significantly diminished. No free ride on national security or U.S.-Korea alliance, and no free trade that can be taken for granted for South Korea. So South Korea has to come up with a new strategy for survival without taking all these premiums that happen to exist thanks to the U.S. hegemonic power after Second World War. This is time for South Korea to come up with a critically new thinking.
First, we need to resolve the problem that Professor Shin mentioned. Well, thank you two very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of News Inside. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more next week.